It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I am excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Patrick Hogan. He's the CEO of Tenfold, a revenue performance platform, and they're based in Austin, Texas. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on the show. I love the podcast and lots of great information, and I'm honored to be on the show.
Well, pleasure to have you here. And take a minute, introduce yourself, maybe tell us how you got your start with, in sales, such as it is, and working with Tenfold.
Sure thing. So I got my start in engineering. So I started a computer consulting company at age 14. I took the money that I made from that and I bought my first house at age 18.
Wow.
And then I graduated from Ottawa with a bachelor's degree at 19. And so just really kind of a lot of pent up ambition there early on. And I transitioned I built a real estate company in 2010. When the market dipped,
in Canada or in the U.S.
In the U.S. and this was in the Central Valley in California. Partnered, had some partners. I was the chief engineer and created an algorithm that allowed us to find properties that were distressed in pretty bad neighborhoods, but they had very good rental income. And so we would go in. There's a lot of problems with vacancies where people would break in the houses.
Right.
With drugs. And so we would go in, we'd buy the houses, we'd remodel them, we'd get tenants in there. And so it was really a win-win where the community would get better because we went in there, and then also it was a good investment because we saw some great appreciation over the last couple of years. And so that was, I did that. And then around 2013, 14, I noticed this really, really big data issue in sales. And the big data issue is that, you've got Salesforce and you've got all your customers in there, and you're thinking, hey, I'm done. I've got everything set up and this is great. But the problem is what you start to notice as you use it more and more is the activities, the interactions, do I know when someone in my company last called this customer? Do I know when somebody in my company last called this lead? And so together with a group of co-founders, we incorporated in December 2014. We got into Techstars in 2015, and we really saw a revolution occurring in sales. And this is the capturing of all interactions and really building a good sales process that we now call the revenue performance platform.
So it's not that you couldn't capture all interactions in Salesforce, though. It's just that reps didn't.
You were, Andy, you're 100% correct. And so you could capture. So I really see this in three generations, right? And so you've got the first generation, you've got the rise of CRMs, and you've got, Salesforce comes out, early 2000, sales CRMs were created. We moved from an analog to a digital world, and, businesses move customer information from paper files to digital records. And this was an amazing transformation, right? And you could capture data, just like you're saying, you could click a button and log a call, you could click a button and log an email, and this was awesome. And really transformed the way we did business. Now, the problem with that is what we started to realize is that reps just don't do it, right? What are sales reps best at? Sales reps are best at charisma, building rapport, asking powerful questions to get context, and really, working directly with customers, and really that administrative burden of logging a call and then capturing all the notes and then remembering, 2 days later to follow up with that prospect. That's just not what they have evolved to do, right? And so this is where you see sort of generation 2, these legacy interaction platforms. You have platforms like InsideSales.com. They come on the scene around 2004. They're very focused in a narrow field, closing the initial sale, very focused on the sales department. And they've done a great job of growing that with their technology. And in that time frame, though, modern sales has really moved on. And this is what we call the subscription revolution. And I think you're seeing it, Andy, where organizations are starting to realize that the true value of a customer is not in the initial sale. It's not in a one-call close. The true value is in the long-term value of the customer, and that means the entire customer life cycle and maintaining and growing a long-term relationship. And so, what I think you can liken this to, imagine the last time you had a really poor customer support experience, and imagine how you called in or you emailed in and nobody helped you. And you could be a very high value customer in the long term of that product, but if you had a very poor customer support experience, you're going to churn, and you're now the long term value is diminished, and we're seeing this across the whole economy. We're seeing it across the whole economy, and that's really where Tenfold comes in. Is we built a modern revenue performance platform, much like inside sales, but with brand new technology, modern technology, where we're able to deploy to an entire organization by connecting to their existing phone system in the cloud and capturing every phone event and every email that's going through that company.
Okay. So, but there are, and so, I want to make sure we understand what Tenfold does, because, there are, as you said, there's all these, I call them sales development platforms that I think they call themselves, Sales Loft, Inside Sales, certainly, overlap with some of that, outreach, so on and so forth. And then we've got, client success and Totango and others on the customer success side. So you're saying you sort of span across the whole thing. Yeah.
So what I would say is, like, where we fit is, and those are some great companies that you mentioned, InsideSales.com, Sales Loft, Outreach, and these are great, and they all really fall into the same category, where what they do is they put even Salesforce Voice, which is in Lightning and getting some adoption, they all sort of put this. They all sort of put this phone system on top of a phone system, where, with Sales Loft, when you dial, it dials your phone. And so you've got this results in two problems. Number one, because you're bridging through multiple phone devices, the audio quality is very, very bad, very bad. If you actually look at some of the reviews, there's not happiness in terms of the audio quality, because it's
digitally encoded twice, right? That's, you encode digital, it doesn't sound good.
You got it. And you know that, from your podcast and from your, experience in the industry. And so I really put all of those SDR tools over in one category, the same category. We are a completely different solution. And what we have done, it took us a lot of time and a lot of work, is we've actually created a platform where we plug into 95% of existing phone systems, and we plug into all existing email systems. And so, so sort of like the NSA, we can come in and we can tap into, the channel that links up the entire organization, and we can automatically capture all of the metadata that's going on within a company automatically. And so what does this result in? Number one, you get the same phone system that you've been using and has great audio quality. What are systems like Avaya, Cisco, Polycom, ShoreTel? What have they been good at? They've been good at providing us amazingly good call quality. And so you still get that. And number two, you get a huge decreased cost, because instead of bringing in this phone system on top of a phone system, you're using what you already have. And so that's where the modern, platform comes in. And that's how we really differentiate amongst other platforms, is we come in with something that you can deploy in 15 minutes, and you can capture all of the data within your company.
Right. And then it looks like what you do is you make it easier then to add notes on top of that, so that you get the whole issue of sort of, you've got the metadata, but then some sort of annotation about it that sort of fulfills the CRM compliance, becomes much simpler, it sounds like, with the approach you're taking.
You got it. And security is a big aspect as well. And a lot of these enterprise companies, that's really the space that we play in. A lot of these enterprise companies have already had, Sarbanes-Oxley and, ISO certifications on all their phone equipment. And anytime you bring in some other platform like Outreach or Sales Loft or Inside Sales, you're adding in this new technology where there's a lot of privacy issues. And so by plugging into that existing system, we also solve the security issues. So how then does Tenfold work relative to, call recording and so on, which is becoming increasingly important? Yeah. So what we do is we plug in directly capture those call recordings. Call recording is also something that existing systems like Avaya, Cisco, ShoreTel, that they've done a very good job of already doing very, very well. And so what we do is we just use what's already there, and then we take that data and we plug it in as a URL inside of Salesforce.
Okay. So one question I guess is trying to see how you position yourself then too is again, back to sort of the sales development platforms. They tend to incorporate now increasingly some of the automation functions, sequences, follow-up sequences and so on, or cadence now to use the term that most people use. Is that something that's available in Tenfold?
It is. And so what we describe is really simple sequencing, and simple sequencing is something more akin to, say, like a boomerang. And that what we find is that there's a top-down sequencing approach and there's a bottom-up sequencing approach. And from a top-down sequencing approach, that's what a lot of the tools you see today do. Now, the issue with that is that it's great from a control perspective, but from an actual usability perspective, we see the simple sequencing tools where it's in your email, like, I know, do you use Boomerang or Follow Up or any of those types of tools on the email side?
Boomerang.
Yeah, and so we have that similar type of technology where it's sort of simple, like, hey, remind me, Boomerang this in 2 days, Boomerang this in 3 days, and for phone calls and leads.
Got it. So who's using it primarily? Are you focused on inside sales, call centers, both? I mean, who's the sort of ideal client profile for you?
Yeah, so some of the ideal client profiles, like what we have is, for example, Wayfair, 700 users using the platform, where we were able to go in and deploy across, from Boston. So that's probably a company a lot about. And they've seen a 30% increase in connect rate using Tenfold. We also have Intercontinental Hotels Group, owners of Holiday Inn. And really these types of companies in the enterprise space, that's where we're really winning.
No, they're using it for proactive outbound, or they're using it as inbound, responding to inbound leads?
So that both of those plus customer success. Okay, and that's where we see a lot of it is I'd say account based and customer success, where you have we'll tie in multiple systems. So we integrate with existing CRMs, and we'll take in. So for example, another customer, Hootsuite, will use Zendesk and Salesforce, right? And so we plug into both Zendesk and Salesforce, and we will like if a customer calls in, an enterprise customer calls in about a case or a ticket, it will capture all of that information and send it back. And so I'd say it's about a 50-50 mix. I mean, mainly enterprises, 50-50 mix between sales and customer success.
Got it. So, on that inbound, because one of the things you do is you identify the caller, is given that you're supporting two different platforms, the Zendesk and the Salesforce, can you identify based on the caller then which one you're going to be updating? Yes.
And oftentimes customers will actually ask us to push to both. And I think that this is something that is going on in the Oracle ecosystem and in the Salesforce ecosystem, is that even as Salesforce, buys these other, ecosystem-based companies, even Desk.com, they don't all really talk. They don't all really sync, right? Like you're usually acquiring a company from the outside, bringing it in, selling it, but then the linking between the two is not very great. And so what we typically would do is, even if something comes in for Zendesk, that record will usually also be in Salesforce. And so we'll grab both data profiles, we'll aggregate it, we'll display it to the user, and then when they take their notes, we'll then push back that data to both platforms.
Got it. So then do you provide like a rules capability that they can use to set up sort of custom screens for agents and so on?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So you're really sort of performing sort of a plumbing function to some degree, right, with the multiple systems that you're linking.
Yeah. Where I'd say really the evolution of that is that we looked at the ground level and we said, what is the using first fundamentals and saying, what is the fundamental problem here? The fundamental problem is it's missing data. Reps aren't manually entering this data. And so you can have all the tools in the world, like, Insight Squared, or, all the reporting and pipeline tools you want. Even Einstein, I think that was an interesting one at Dreamforce recently, is you have Einstein, and that's, hey, it's amazing. Einstein looks great. It's got some great marketing and great flashy stuff. But Einstein is only as good as the data that's in your CRM. You can't predictively, come up with what the rep should do next unless you have the data. And so the way that we attacked it, the way that Tenfold sees the world, is that we said we really have to go in and capture all of the data first and make sure that the data is being pushed and synchronized to the right places. And then on top of that, now that we have the data, we're able to go in and do, and really able to create lists and to give reminders and to do simple sequencing, and being able to do that next level of really sales performance. And we, the reason why we went with revenue and performance platform is instead of sales performance platform is just that we have a lot of customer success clients. Mm-hmm. And we really see it as, customer success and customer support are just a function of sales in that, and I think in some organizations becoming just as important as sales, where deals are being won and lost, are being lost in customer support quite often. And so that's where, revenue performance platform comes from, is that what we really focus on is what are the sequences of events, what is the data that is required to help your company increase revenue.
Right. I think it's the absolute right focus. I mean, any sort of mature company over some period of time is, once they've been on the market, are going to be deriving the majority of their revenue from existing customers. So, having that broader focus, I think, is good. So one of the things you focus on a lot is responsiveness. I mean, that's a key word you see throughout your literature and so on. And certainly it's a topic that people listening to the show that have read my books know that really at the forefront of what I write about. So tell us why you think responsiveness is so important.
I think responsiveness is a super interesting topic for me, and that I think, and I'm just going to digress just a little bit if you give me a minute here. And that,
sure.
I think from response, like there's a very interesting study that was recently done on charisma. And charisma is one of these things, we kind of see it in like the elections, right? Like, I mean, you look at, say, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and and you look at, say, Hillary Clinton's got amazing experience, and whereas Donald Trump, the thing that's really kind of gotten him where he is this charisma. The guy is just, you want to watch him, right? Like last night I actually.
So what you're saying is a car wreck has charisma.
I agree with you. I agree with you in a lot of aspects there, and I don't want to get too political on it, but I think I try to look at him in a different way and say, what is the thing that he does that makes him super charismatic? And there was a study that was recently done about this, is like, what is charisma? And what they found was that speed of response. And I'm not talking about phone calls right now. I'm talking about even in-person communications, is that if I'm sitting and talking with you and you ask me a question and I sit here and I ponder and I think and I go through like a deep logical flow and a deep logical process and I come up with the right answer, then and I say it, you will hear it and you'll think, okay, logically, good answer, right? But if you put in the same situation a different person and they're able to come up with an answer, even if it's not as correct, even if it's just slightly less correct, if they're able to come up with that answer, twice as fast, 3 times as fast, and come up with an immediate response, you will see that person is charismatic. And I'm not saying, this isn't my theory. This is a study that was done, in that charisma, in a large part in human society, is determined by, in fact, the speed of response. And so I think that's something that's very unique, because I think in sales, I think you have to have a fundamental selling process to really sell and close deals. But I also think you've got to have a fundamental level of charisma, in that a lot of top salespeople, they do 2 things right. They get their follow-up, they get their fundamentals, they get their, but they also what do they do really, really well? They persevere, and they're very, very good at follow-up, and they're very, very good at responsiveness. And so this is something that we really focus on. And what we do is that because we capture the data, what we'll say is if there's a call that comes in and or a lead comes in through like a web to lead form into Salesforce, and no one on the team has followed up with it within 5 minutes. This is a product that we have that's called Lead Danger. Mm-hmm. We will send out sort of a social shaming tool where we will create an email that CCs the sales manager and every single person in sales with that lead information and says, hey, this lead came in, it was assigned to this person, and no one has followed up within 10 minutes. You have, and then it will say a statistic right below it where it will say, according to this data study, you are if you let this go for another 6 hours, you are 100 times less likely to close this customer. And so that's something that we really hold near and dear, is that especially on the phone, calling leads back right away is so fundamentally important. And I know you've talked about this a lot, you've written about this a lot, and I totally agree with you. I think it's one of those key aspects where most companies and most sales organizations could, just by doing this one thing, which I would consider this to be a fundamental sales principle. I mean, forget all the complex reporting, forget all the pipeline analysis, forget all this, it's sort of like going to the gym and you're more worried about the 6 protein supplements you're going to take afterward instead of what you're actually going to do in the gym. And this, if most businesses just fix this one thing, they'd see their sales increase.
Yeah, well, I give an example in my first book, Zero Time Selling, about this with a client I worked with. And I would that's why I would maybe change the word from charisma to trust, perhaps, is that because the sales team, half of them were sort of the least charismatic people in the world. One was pathologically shy. Is they're selling somewhat of a technical product, sold for about $30,000. Called me in. This was sales that sort of flattened out. CEO wasn't sure why. He was a successful entrepreneur. It was his third or fourth company. And, came in, and it didn't take long to find out that, they just weren't following up their leads. And they were getting a lot of leads, and they just weren't following them up. And it's taken like on average 3 days, 4 days, and they weren't even following up 100% of them. So, I turned to the CEO. I said, well, I can fix this problem in 5 minutes. And he said, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, what we're going to do is, we're going to have all the leads go to your sales op person, and they're going to put it into Salesforce and distribute the leads. And I said, what's going to change in the process is that you, Mr. CEO, is every day at 4:30, you're going to log on to Salesforce and make sure they're all followed up. Now, they didn't have the lead danger problem. This was years ago. They didn't have the lead danger, which they could have used.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
What happened is, the salespeople instantly had 100% follow-up. But what happened, to the point I think you're beginning to drive at with responsiveness, the reason I say it's so important, and you talked about, is the one thing the company can do. It's what Charles Duhigg in his book, The Power of Habit, calls the keystone habit, is you master that, the ripple effect throughout the entire company is amazing. What this company did is, we got them down to the point they followed up every lead within 30 minutes. And
I love it.
The customers were just blown away, right? They were working 3/4 of the way through the customer's buying process on that first call, because then the competitors weren't calling for another 2 days. And so it's this huge trust building, this huge differentiator between them and everybody else. And really, by virtue of doing nothing else but that change in their sales process, over 2 years, they more than doubled the cost size of the company.
That's amazing.
So the power of responsiveness is incredible.
Isn't it so amazing how it's really the fundamentals, like what you're talking about here in terms of driving that responsiveness, and also I'd say probably you've talked about this. I was listening to some of your other podcasts, and a regular listener, and you heard about where you're talking about the power of questions, and that a lot of times people are not sales, if you take a good salesperson versus, say, a substandard salesperson, and you really dissect it, like just the ability to ask, contextual questions and to ask the right questions and get the right information is also so powerful. Don't you find it fascinating in the sales world that really, it's not really that, it's not, hey, how many Don Drapers do you have on your team? It's more, how many people do you have on your team that can execute on these fundamental things like responsiveness.
Well, that's why I love
and asking the right questions and using,
Well, I was going to say, that's why I love what you're doing with Lead Danger, is that because, it's, to me, it's like, wow, that's what you need. We've got all this technology we're applying to sales and all these sales enablement technologies and so on. But at the end of the day, I was just talking to another guest about this recently, is that we still have the same problems in sales. 50% of reps don't make quota. 50 to 60% of deals, the qualified deals in a pipeline don't close. They go to no decision. I can sort of go on with all these stats that have been basically unchanged for 20 years, since really the beginning of the internet in a commercial sense. So now we've got all these technologies. They're not moving the needle in terms of productivity. So
it's just fascinating.
Right. So what's going to make it change? And I believe, as clearly you do as well, is that it's increased focus on these, what I call sales habits, and these fundamental behaviors that, if we spent less time talking about skills and more time about behaviors, that responsiveness first and foremost among it. And to me, responsiveness, I have a very specific definition, which is not just speed, but it's content as well. It's value. So you talked about, if you can get back to somebody fast, you don't necessarily need to have the perfect answer, because people don't make perfect decisions. When buyers are buying products and services, it's this whole concept of the good enough decision. That's what most people make, right? They've got a certain amount of time and bandwidth they can allocate to making a decision. And when they've gathered the information that meets that criteria, they move forward. So,
to get it done, to get the item checked off their list.
Get it checked off the list.
They got a busy day.
Exactly. So, you could get a request from a customer and you could spend 3 or 4 days coming up with a perfect answer. But if I got back to them in 30 minutes with one that was good enough, that moved them to the next stage of their buying process, I'm going to win.
Yeah, every single time.
I'm going to win.
No question.
It's just, and so, like that client I was talking about before, example we did there is, once I asked some questions, got some answers, is invariably the customer would say, well, can I get a demo of your software? And so, what they'd say is, can we schedule a demo of your software? And so what I taught the salespeople to do is to say no, but we can do it right now.
I love it. You guys could get it.
It blew them away.
Hot demo.
It blew them away. Can we schedule? No, but we can do it right now. And in about 75% of the cases, the customer said, great, let's do it. So they'd get almost, I said, 3/4 of the way through the buying process for the customer in the first 45 minutes.
Oh man. And you're getting the customer to that aha moment way faster than your competitors. And as soon as you built that like reciprocity, and as soon as you built that influence and that, like, they're not going to just go to some other competitor. Like, people, buyers are not logical, right? Buyers are emotional beings. And once they've got to the aha moment with you, because you've used these tactics and you move them, to the next stage in the buying process, you built that trust with them. And so now they're going to move forward with you.
Well, what you do is you eliminate their incentive to go talk to somebody else. So we had a phrase for that. For people listening, we call that taking prospects off the market.
I like it.
And that's what you're trying to do. And so, I have a whole talk I give about this subject that, and ultimately, more people will see it, but it's called, how do you win the sale before you win the order? It's that aha moment. How do you get to that aha moment? That's winning the sale. Where the customer says, that's who I want to do business with. That's
competitive advantage right there.
Huge.
That's huge competitive advantage.
Huge. We're going to move on to the last segment of the show, and we'll spare you and Patrick the pain of doing that. But the last segment of the show, we've got some standard questions I ask all my guests. And the first one's a hypothetical scenario, which is, in the scenario, you, Patrick, have just been hired as VP of sales at a company whose sales have stalled out, and the board and CEO are anxious to hit the reset button and get things going back on track. So what 2 steps could you take your first week on the job that could have the biggest impact?
Okay. First week on the job, what I would do is to my hiring, to my supervisor, I would say, do not announce. Number one, first step, I would say, do not announce that I'm the new VP of sales for 3 days. and I would stay at home, or I would lock myself in a room, and I would pore over the Salesforce data that's in the system, and I would find out number one, how responsive is this organization? When a lead comes in, how responsive? Number two, I would test all of the marketing funnels. I would go to the site. I would create a test. I would fill out a fake person. I'd come up with a persona. I'd fill out a form, and I would wait to see how I was approached in the sales process by the existing team. If I was approached, because hey, maybe I'm not called back. And so I would find out really how it works live, and I would take notes about who that person was and how they did it. And I'd probably do that a few times just to get a couple of samples. And then number three, I would pull up an opportunities report, and I would really figure out, of the opportunities that we create, how many times do we follow up and how often do we follow up? Because what I find is that in many organizations, many organizations are just completely drunk on the power of continually getting leads. And there's just more coming in, and you come in tomorrow and there's another 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000, and you just chasing new leads. But what I find happens is that oftentimes when you're only chasing new leads instead of really cultivating past opportunities, is that you leave a lot of money on the table. And so I would do those three things, and I would find out, really kind of take like a sales report card and audit and take, understand responsiveness, understand the flows and what the message is, and then really understand follow-up on the opportunity side. And I will bet you that any organization that is truly stalled out in sales has a problem in one of these three areas, and I would hone it. And then the next thing I would do is I would come into the office, I would be announced, and then I would work with the team to make sure that we fix these fundamental issues.
Excellent. Good response. And I really like the last one too about the follow-up, because I think it's something we're seeing in sales, especially in the tech space, that's really problematic, is burning through lists and having what I consider sort of an unsustainably low close rate, burning through these lists instead of really working on the opportunities that have come in. So love that. So, okay, now some rapid fire questions. You can give me one word answers or elaborate if you wish. So the first one is, when you, Patrick Hogan, are out selling Tenfold services, what's your most powerful sales attribute?
Most powerful sales attribute is questions. Is that we had a I'll keep it brief there, but we had a really good sales trainer that taught us what I call TED. And TED is where it's a question asking tactic, where when you ask somebody a question, you don't let them just stop there. What you do is you do a TED. Either T, tell me more. E, explain to me this. D, describe to me this. Where very open-ended questions that allow the person to give you a lot of information. And I find that the best demos and the best pitches that I've been on are ones where I spend the first, so many people are just so eager. Just, I want to show you my demo. I want to show you my shitty demo, and look at my demo. And that is the totally wrong. You're just barfing out this demo. And that's the totally wrong approach, because most products these days have several features. And in a sales stack, people do not buy the platform. They buy because they need to add a few of these features to their sales stack. Or, maybe they're a company that does everything on inbound calls. Maybe they're a company that does everything on outbound calls. Those are totally different behaviors. And so I find that the best tactic I use or attribute I use is I take the first 15 minutes to just continuously ask questions, and I will deliberately take notes, and then I will change the way that I operate in the last half, and just use the information I have to tailor whatever I'm speaking about to that person.
Excellent. Okay. Great answer. So who's your sales role model?
Okay, sales role model. I got two. So I said Frank Azzolino is one of them. He's our sales trainer, and he's just very, very good. And then I'd also say Dan Sienkiewicz, who's the CSO of Tenfold. He's just one of the best salespeople I've ever met.
Okay. So what's one book you recommend every salesperson read?
So I read a lot, and I use my Kindle a lot, and I don't have just one, but I would say here's two. I'd say number one, deliberate practice. I'm a big believer that it takes preparation, and it takes commitment, and it takes practice. Tiger Woods is Tiger Woods because A, he had a lot of natural talent, but B, he was the most deliberate practice person ever. And so I recommend that. And I think I also recommend Influence by Robert Cialdini. And very good book. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, definitely a good book. I've not read Deliberate Practice, but it's on my list. All right. Last question for you is what music's on your playlist these days? So I actually, there's a lot of work to do in Tenfold. And so I try to find things like music where I actually try to eliminate choices, because I think if I eliminate choices, I'll have more energy for other choices. And so I use a service out of New York called Hypem, HYPEM.com. It's mostly mashups and dance music, and it has a stream, and it really kind of just gets me into flow. And so I hit play, and it just presents me with songs. All right. Hypem. I'm going to check it out. All right. Well, Patrick, it's been great talking with you. Tell people they can find out more about Tenfold and connect with you. Sure thing. So finding out more about Tenfold, you can just go to tenfold.com. If you want to find out more about the way we think, you can go to tenfold.com/blog. We have a very active blog. I write things on there regularly. And if you ever have any questions, you can email me directly at Patrick, Patrick, at tenfold.com. And I'm always interested in answering questions. So just send me an email. Excellent. Well, again, Patrick, thanks for being on the show. And friends, remember, make it a part of your daily routine every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And one easy way to do that is take a minute and subscribe to this podcast, Accelerate. And that way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Patrick Hogan, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me, and until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.